Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here. So today's video was inspired by a video I saw on Instagram by plenty.tv, and I think it's a studio who they do motion graphics and other stuff, right? And this is something I saw which I thought was interesting, so I decided to see if I can do the same thing or something similar in Cinema 4D. So let's actually check Cinema 4D, and eventually this is what I was able to come up with, which was quite similar to what they did though. So you can see it's basically the same ropes like forming together. If I scroll on it, you can see it's forming and it's looping, right? It's just one frame, only that this a bit faster, but it's basically the same idea. So let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will create this effect, and it's quite simple. So let's get in. So I'm in Cinema 4D and I'm using Cinema 4D R26, but you should be able to do this in almost every version of Cinema 4D that you have. And you can see I already have some splines created in here. So these are the shape, the movement of the spline, how it starts and how it ends, right? So if I disable all of this, you can see this is the final shape. So let's go ahead and see how we will create something like this. I'll show this in the new scene quickly, how you will create this this particular spline or the shape, this shape per se. So let's create a new scene. So I have a new scene here, and you can manually draw the shape you want by yourself, but in this case I used a different method. So I use the seesaw. If I come into my splines, choose the seesaw and come into the type, from seesaw you choose lemniscate, right? And you can see you have this infinite looking shape here. I'll change the plane mode to XZ so that it will be flat on the plane. And I want this half of it, like the S half of it, right? So we can use either the MoSpline to redraw it, or I can manually do it myself. So I'll make it editable, press C to make it editable, come to point mode, and then I'll select all these points from all the way here, right, to all the way these splines. I'll delete all of these splines. But I'll come here again, delete this one, make sure you select it here and delete everything. So you can see we have this S looking shape spline. This is what we want, right? Now I'll select the points, all the point, Control A, and I'll rotate it minus 20. So let's undo, select Control A to select all the points. Let's go to top view rather, yeah. Right, and make sure we are in the point mode. Right, now let's rotate our spline in the point mode minus 20. So you can see it's showing in there minus 20. Right, so now that we have done rotating it, now let's create come to our object and create a symmetry object. Put the seesaw, make it a child of it, and now let's select the seesaw. Let's come to object mode, not point mode, object mode, and now let's move our seesaw. The seesaw. But before we make sure our symmetry mode is the plane is set to XY, so that you can move it on the Z. So if I select it and move it, you can see it's aligning. So I'll select the seesaw, come to its coordinates and set it to, like, say, I think 44 will be fine. 44 I think is fine. As a matter of fact, let's make 43. I think 43 is fine. But you can see we have extra spline we don't want, so we can come in here, come to the point, back to the point mode again. Now let's select the points that's overlapping and delete them. And see these 2 points are still overlapping, but for now it's okay, we will leave it like that. We have to clear some points out here, but I'll show how we want to clear it and know we are clearing the right points later. So I'll make the symmetry object editable. So I'll press C, and now I can see we have the seesaw, that's one spline. You can delete the symmetry now. And now the spline, if we have one spline, but you can see these two are still not connected. So we can select the two, right click and choose weld, and you can see there's this line trying to connect it. If I click, now it's weld them together, and now we have true one spline. Now, so this part is sorted, but the other edges, so if I come into my Mograph object and I create a cloner, right, in the object mode, I'll set it to linear, right, and I'll set it to linear. I want it to move on the Z like that. So I'll make a seesaw a child of the cloner, And now let's move it up like that, and you can see it's not well it's not working properly, right? So let's move it somewhere here, maybe 180, right? And now you can see we don't have, like, we have extra splines like in the initial one, right? So let's do the same thing. Let's delete them as well. So I'll select these two, right? So this the 3, I'll delete the 3, and I'll come here and delete these 3 as well. Right, and let's see what we have in our clone. I think for now we can do with this one, right? Even though it's intersecting, but it's important because we are cheating. It's not like a direct line. It's actually different splines. But because they intersect, it feels like it's a line. This is basically how I created the shape of the nets or the rope that I use, or the net, however you want to call it. So this is basically how I created it. After that, you can see we have a lot of splines, points in here. I didn't want that many points. So what I did is I went into my Mograph here and I created a MoSpline, right? In the MoSpline, I changed the mode from simple to spline, and I went to the spline tab, right? And I drop in the seesaw into the source spline, right? And now let's actually select the MoSpline, come to the object tab, and make sure the display mode is set to line so that you can see how it looks like. Then let's hide the seesaw. So now what you're seeing is the MoSpline. Now with the MoSpline, if you come to the spline tab, you can actually control the number of points in here. So instead of it saying set to vertex, I'll set it to even, and now I reduce the count of points you have in here. So I'll set it to something like, say, 21, right, which is fine. So I'll set it 21, and then I'll make the MoSpline editable. After that, I'll select the MoSpline, and you can see if I come in here, set to linear, I'll set it to one of these shapes, and I think the one I used in this situation was Akima, right? You can actually take time to make sure your spline aligns. You can probably make this one a bit longer so that it looks cleaner and everything, but this is quickly to show you. So I used the Akima to get this shape, and after that I came in here, create a bend deformer, and I make it a child of the spline, right? Set it like X and say fit to a parent, and now I bend it a bit like that. All right, keep length. So that's how I got the final shape. I bent it like probably, I think 60 was fine. 60 will be fine. And after it bends, let's rotate it. And one thing that's important, like, we should make sure the axis of our spline is at the tip here. So I'll disable the bend deformer first. I'll select the MoSpline, come to Tools, axis center. If you don't find it here, you can also find in previous versions or older versions, it's actually found somewhere in the mesh. You can find the axis center there, but in here it's found in Tools. So Tools, axis center, and then I want the axis to be like the last part of the X, right? So let's drag it somewhere here, and you can see now our axis center has been moved down here. And let's close our axis center. So now if we rotate our spline, and see it rotates on the from this particular pivot. So now let's enable our bend deformer, and now you can rotate our spline. So this is basically how I achieved the shape of our spline, right? After that, one thing I also did was, after this was done, I actually set it to, so what I did again was came to edit current state to object. All right, object rather, current state to object, and it created a permanent shape for me. But the issue with this permanent shape is that if I come to point mode, you can see we have a lot of extra points again. So now I have to reuse the MoSpline technique that I did to get this shape to reduce the number of points to 21, right? And that's very, very important. All the points in your object. So if I come back into my object here with my splines in here, where is it? This is it, right? And go to point mode and select all of them. You can see all of them have 21 points. All of them have similar points, right? All of them have 21 points, and that's important so that the morphing will be very linear, it will be smooth, right? So that's important. So when I re-baked it and got a lot of points, I actually took it back into MoSpline, like what I did, into the mode, to the spline mode, and then replaced it to reduce it to 21, right? So that after I make it editable, I can now use the how do you call it, one of these shapes, which is the Akima, and get back my shape well bent, and at the same time, you know, like have to like less points and all of that. So after this is done, so this is the first shape, and from here I manipulated it to create a smaller shape with it, move the points up and down using deformers. Like, so for instance, I used the freeform deformer, so I'll come in here, create a freeform deformer, FFD, make it a child of the spline, and then all I have to do is to make sure, let's go top view, right? Make sure our freeform deformer covers our spline, right? Something like that. And then we can now go to point mode, select the freeform deformer, and use the rectangular live tool to select it, and now move it and adjust it and all of that to the shape we want. So I did that to create all the other sizes, and anytime I rebake it or get a lot of splines, I use the MoSpline to create the exact number of points I want, which is the 21 points, and then I set it to Akima so that the point will always be 21, and that's important, so that it will be moved. So that's basically how I did to create all of these small shapes and everything, and that's the technique behind creating the spline. Right. Another one last thing I'll add is that I created a straight line, and that one I just use the inside, and I'll set it to something like that, inside, and I'll set the sides to just 2, and you can see it gives you straight line. If you take the inside and set it to 2, it gives you a straight line, right? And then I think I choose the axis, ZY axis, so that you get it plain. And then you make sure, if I enable the 5, the main one, make sure the length of your line, your spline is equal to the same thing as the base of your final shape, right? So that's basically it. And at the same, this one too, I make sure it has 21 points, so that when it's morphing, it will morph smoothly. So basically that's what I did. So you can see it has spline and also has 21 points. Now another issue is that sometimes let me show. So now that we have all of these, right, all of these spline, after you've created your number of splines, made them small, you can see, so it starts, this is the first one, right? Let me hide it. So it starts with the line, and then the second one comes, this is it, the smaller one from the back, and this one comes in, right? And now this one comes in, and now the final shape. You can give it the number of splines whatever you want to get all of these shapes if you want. So basically this is how I created it. So now let's go to how we will get to create the whole netting, and it's really simple. All we have to do is now come into our Mograph, come here and create a cloner object, select all of this and make it a child of the cloner object. Select the cloner object and change the mode to linear, right? It can be any mode though, but let's set it to linear for now. And just by doing that and coming to our linear, first of all, let me set the centimeters to like the position Y to 0, right? So you can see we have only 3 splines. Let's actually even set it to 1, right? So now what we have is just the first spline, right? So we select the clone, come to the clone mode, and instead of iterate, we will choose blend. Nothing happens, right? It's just the first one that you will be choosing. But if I should create, let's say, several copies, you can see it's blending from the line all the way to the final shape. But for now, let me set it to 1. And now with the cloner selected, if I come to my effectors and I create a plane effector, right, you can see it's moving it upwards. We don't want it to move in the position, so I'll go to the parameters and I'll uncheck position. What I want to check is modify clones. Now in the modify clones, see what happens if I start moving the modify clones. If I move it, you can see now it's morphing. It's morphing from the spline and forming and going through all the shape to the final shape. So it's the modify clones that we are going to use, and it's very, very interesting. So now let's set the modify clones to 100%, and that's basically it. So now if I select my clones and come to my object mode, and now increase the number of clones to, like, say let me say 20, right? And let's move it on the X. So I'll move it on the X like that. Let's go to the top view so that you see. Let's move it on the X. Basically something like this is fine. So I think I want it to intersect a little bit. So we've basically created 20, right? And now if I select the plane effector, come to our fields and create a linear field, right? Let me set it to change the orientation to Z. See what happens. So if I use the linear field and I start dragging, and see it's animating. It's basically from line, then it comes in and comes in and comes in and everything. So that's basically the whole idea behind the animation. Let me actually make the linear field a bit bigger, and you can see. So you can see smoothly coming in. So that's basically the whole idea about it. So let me first of all have the linear field, in fact the plane effector and everything, come into the linear field and the plane effector and come to the field. So I won't check the linear field for now. And now after we are done with this, the rest is creating the multiple copies, right? So to do that, I'll create another line. So I'll come in here and I'll create let's say I'll create an inside once again, right? I'll select the not rectangle. I'll come in and create an inside, and I'll set the size to just 2, and you can see we have a line created. Let's make the line thicker, longer, like say 4,000. It's, I think 4,000, but yeah, 4,000 is fine. And now I'll create another cloner object. Make the first clone, which is this one, a child of the new cloner object, right? And you can see we have our splines created, and now everything, we have basically the shape of our net, right? But I don't want the mode. I'll select the cloner, change it from grid to object, and the object you want to clone on is the spline, the end side. So I'll select the cloner, come to the object, and then drag in the spline in here, the end side, right? And you can see it's creating 10 copies. Right, let's come to the transform of the new clone that we've created, and let's rotate it like say 90, right? And let's select it and increase the number of counts to like I think 30 will be fine for now. And let's reduce the end side. I think it's too much, so and reduce the length of the end side so that our splines work. So basically that's everything. After that, if I enable my plane effector, let's see, come to my effectors, enable the linear field, you can see we have it working. Let's select it and rotate it something like this, or however you want it. Yeah, right. And now all we need to select the clone, the first one, and the clone, this one, the one that's cloning on the end side. And because we are cloning on a spline, you can just come down here to where it says rate, and let's increase the rate like say 10, and let's hit play, and you can see we've achieved the animation, and it will continue to play. I think there's this getting slower, so for now let me reduce the count to just 20, and maybe reduce the length of the spline to maybe say 2000. All right, and let's see if it works. So if I hit play, you can see it's playing. Let's actually increase the speed a little bit. So I'll select the clone again, increase the rate to maybe 15 or 20. And you can see I don't know if it's getting clear. All right, let's rotate our camera on the side here. But basically, I hope you get the idea. I think, let me first of all pause it and go to the original scene. So this is the original one that I created. So basically, it's the same thing that I've created. You can see just that because I wanted to use different colors for each line in here, different colors for each line, I duplicated the clone so that I have 3 different clones, but it's basically the same thing. You can see I've created the lines, and if I hit play, you can see it's basically working, and it's just one, and I've cloned it on a spline here. As I've cloned it on the spline here, all right, and I've created these copies, and I've set the rate to -15, so it's automatically moving by itself, right? So that's basically it, and it will keep playing forever. And because we've set the angle and everything, you can set make it loop easily. All right, so that's basically the idea. So you can see it's looping. So that's how I did it. I'm struggling to get the angle in this particular scenario, but I hope you get the idea. So basically, that's basically the angle. You increase the number of splines and everything so that it plays smoothly though. So now I can see it's actually something is happening. It's actually playing in reverse. So let's select the clone, right? And instead of making it move 20%, let's set it to -20 rather. So now it will be forming, not loosen. So you can see so now if you look at it, you can see, for instance, this spline here, all these are straight lines, and it's gradually, you can see it's forming up, and then it falls in and all that. So that's basically the whole idea of how you use it. This thing was created. I hope this was useful and you learned something from it. Now to render it, I used Redshift, right? And it's as simple as selecting all of these lines, right click, and you can see apply, add Redshift tag to it, and then I set it to cylinder mode, right? And if I bring my Redshift render view, Redshift render view, and hit render, because I've applied the Redshift object tag to it, it will automatically see the splines, all of that. I applied it to all of the splines that I used, right? And you automatically see the splines and it will actually render them. This when you are using Redshift. So you can see like it's rendering, and it took a bit of time because it was calculating all the geometries and the splines and then the mesh, all of that. So it took a bit of time to show, but from here going, you can go ahead and add your materials to it, and it will actually show in your renderer. So you can simply create a Redshift material and apply it to your cloner object itself, right? You don't necessarily have to apply it to each individual spline. You can apply it to just the cloner object, and then when you hit render again, it will actually show in your scene. So you can see I've applied the material, and it's actually showing the gray material that I've applied and everything. So you can go ahead and add your textures or your colors, whatever you want to add to it. So this is how you use Redshift if you want to use Redshift to render this. And like I said, in the original one, I created several clones, or three individual clones, so that I can able to texture them differently with different colors. So all I have to do is to duplicate the clones and then use different materials. Now, to use Cinema 4D inbuilt renderer, standard renderer, it means you have to actually create a real geometry, right? We can also use Cinema 4D hair material to render the splines, right? But if you want to get real geometry, you have to use the sweep, right? So let me quickly show how we can use the sweep. So I'll come in here into my object and I'll create a sweep object, right? And I'll create, let's say, let me a circle. I'll make the circle like the size, let's say 20, right? And I'll make it a child of the sweep. We can't directly use the clone inside the sweep. We need to put it into a connect object, but we are not going to put the main clone, like the one cloning the bigger whole thing. We will use the first one, the linear one, right? So I'll select create a connect object here. I'll make this clone a child of the connect object, like the linear clone a child of the connect object, right? And I can make the connect a child of the sweep, and it works, right? In R26, for some funny reason, this one works. But if you are using any other version and you're having similar challenges where the connect object doesn't work, you can simply, let's first of all uncheck world, right? You can simply come in here into your object and create a spline mask, right? And make the connect object a child of the spline mask before you put it into the sweep object. And now hopefully I think this one too will work. Now we have a lot of segments going on here, so I can select the circle and reduce the number intermediate point to, like, say 2. I think it's fine. You can select all of these as well and reduce them if you want, like 3 or something. This is when you want to get a faster feedback when you are playing, but when you are rendering, you have to bump it up to get smooth spline. The same thing applies to when you use the tag. So the tag, you right click, come to your render tags, and you can add your Redshift object tag. And in here, this is where you set the thickness, like so I set the thickness to 30 in this case. And when you are rendering, you can actually reduce the size to something big so that it will be faster, like increase it, like, you know, so that it will be faster. But when you are rendering, you have to make sure you reduce it so that you have enough detail so that it will be smooth, right? But now we are using this now for the default one. So now you can see we have the sweep object here, and now we put the sweep object, make it a child of this cloner object now. So the main cloner, and now let's enable the cloner, and you can see we have our sweeps created, right? And it's playing in our feedback as well. So I hope this video was useful and you've learned something from it. Kindly subscribe if you've not, and if you have any question, you can DM me in my Instagram or here under the comment section, and kindly share too if you think this is helpful and can help someone. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.